The enemy put in front of me what I've come to understand as a crossroads that wasn't actually there. It was a mirage. It was a duality. It was a either or choice that wasn't actually there. The choices were turn left and actually give your heart to God fully. And in order to do that, you need to remove yourself from all secular things to include this job, this location, this place where you're planted. Get out, bail, go hard left, and pull up all the roots that you've put down here. Or take a full compromise and understand that you can stay here, but you will live forever with a divided heart. You'll never live into your true identity fully and put to death the old man, because the old man is necessary to survive in this environment.
Hey, sons, welcome back to the Being Sons podcast. Hey, our mission is to help you live in deep union with God as Father and Son. And our discussions on this podcast, I pray, encourage you to live in the reality that God is with you right where you are, that He's eager to speak to you, eager to guide you. Why? It's because He loves you and He is fully committed to raise you into His mature spiritual son. And the truth is that we are created by God to work and to play with Him as partners for eternity. And His training of our souls is underway right now. And so to explore this rich reality in a way that I think is going to be really helpful, we have an old friend and a very, very good friend, Rich Pantusa, back on the podcast. Rich, welcome back. It's great to have you here.
Hey, Jay, thanks so much. It's great to be back. Man, I've missed these conversations, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to dive back in.
Me too. So much. So Rich, I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay.
So, Rich, if you were to sum up the direction that we're going to go in this discussion, what question would encompass the importance of this discussion?
Over the last few years, and in a story that I know we'll get to, I've grown more and more painfully aware in my own experience and then in the lives of the men around me that you are a beautiful shepherd and a beautiful guide in the category specifically of our sonship, of our identity as sons to the Almighty God, the King of this universe, the King of this earth. And that's been unbelievably helpful. So I just want to start by saying thank you for the millions of silent sacrifices and the millions of silent things that you endure painfully for the sake of men like me. So well done. And I've found in my own life and in my own pain that I can absolutely live as a son with one exception. And that's the frontier of my job and my work. I am in what would be considered to be secular work full-time. That's what I do. And I can live in God's abundance and in my identity as a son from the moment I wake up until the moment I walk into the office. And then it's as if I step through some sort of veil into a world that doesn't really identify at all with all the things that you share. So the question that I've been exploring over the last several years now with your guidance and with the help of a lot of other wise guides, and something that I'm genuinely excited to talk about now because I feel like I have a little bit of clarity and a little bit of guidance and a little bit of experience, is how do I find my seat as a son in the presence of God while I work, while I'm in that place on the other side of the veil?
Brilliant question. And to add a little bit of fuel to this fire, which I hope that you as sons out there listening, I hope that you identify with that. And I want to say this, that Rich has got a story, which we'll unpack. I've got a story also. We've got very different assignments right now. But in this, what we're going to try and do is help you wrestle with that question that Rich just posed, because I'll just say up front, uh, even in ministry, I'm wrestling with the same question that you just posed. It doesn't matter where you are at all, because we bring the broken orphan places into everything that we do. So, what a rich question. It's a fantastic discussion that I think we all need. And one of the reasons, Rich, that I over the years, I've heard you have a couple of conversations with some people in the past, and I have, in my friendship with you, just seen you walk out well this tension of how to find purpose and meaning and your identity in a challenging environment. And it's been very inspiring to me to see you do that. You've had a couple of conversations about it. And I just think we need to tease this out, because one of the questions, I mean, I do father-son and I do father-daughter ministry. My main heart is to help men understand who they are as sons. And God just uses kind of different sneaky scenarios to help men come into that, into the presence and the awareness of that need, that what they need more than anything else is a loving father that they can lean on. And that's what we're made for, right? So we'll never be happy until that. But surprisingly, Rich, the question that I get more emails about, and the ones that I have the longest conversations about, are men who are deeply unsatisfied in their work. And they are wrestling exactly with what you're saying. Should I leave? Should I do something different? Should I quit? Like, what kind of work would allow me to live in this new and exciting identity? How do I live it out? So, huge question. So, friends, if that's something in alignment with what you're wrestling with, then you're at the right spot. And let's just pray together that over the course of this conversation, God meets you and presents you with the encouragement or with the question that he wants you to make relevant right now. So, yeah, Jesus, meet us where we are. We have questions for you. So would you raise in us exactly what you want to raise in us, that we might walk with you in the way that you designed us to walk with you? So, why do you believe, Rich, this question is worth asking, or why is this conversation worth having with the microphone on? What's at stake here?
I believe what a lot of our mentors, our mutual mentors, have said about the hour that we live in, and the great falling away is all around us. There's more temptation than there's ever been for men to lose their way or to choose to walk away from God. And there's more temptation and there's more information. There's so much out in the world for men to worship, to bow and take a knee at, outside of the heart of God. And with that as the backdrop, we take our wounded hearts and we take our desire for sonship, especially, when you accept the invitation to take the red pill and believe God at his word, and you believe what Jesus came to provide. You take that into a highly secular environment, a highly purpose-driven, self-sustaining, up and to the right, bottom line matters more than your heart environment. I know that it has brought me to the brink of my own faith. And in looking at the people around me, there's so much cultural momentum in any workplace that's outside of quote unquote kingdom work, that any man, any given day, can make an agreement with our enemy that takes them out completely. Because of the way that our hearts are designed, and the way that when you wake up to the fact that your desire is actually a really good thing, your heart is a really good thing, and you go searching as a very young man in a very young place, no matter what your really real age is, you go searching for, where do I find life and life to the full, all the things that Jesus provided me. You take that into a workplace, a corporate environment, or whatever small business context, the enemy is so allowed to have his way there that it's a trap that's brilliantly set by someone who wants to take us out. So I think it's a vital conversation to be having in this day, in this moment right now.
So it's life or death. It can be, for sure.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I agree. So, all right, let's back up, friends. I want you to get to know Rich where he is. He's one of the best fathers that I've ever known. I've had the privilege of being around his family. His wife is loved. His children know that they're loved. They enjoy being around him. What a gift that is. Whoa, step back and just absorb that reality. Kids, even teenage kids, actually enjoy his presence and his counsel. And there's a dynamic around their dinner table that I've been able to witness and appreciate. So, Rich as a man who's doing some things really well. So Rich, I want them just to know a little bit more about you. So fill us in on what your current story looks like. Family, just kind of where you are with God right now. And when we do events, I don't like dads talking about their work because it usually is a distraction. Mm-hmm. I have them focus on the most important things, which is their relationships with, their family and their story, sonship and adventures. But so we normally say everybody's a chimney sweep. We've all got the exact same job. That way we don't talk about it. But here, I'd like for you to share what it is that you do to put food on the table. So yeah, fill us in on what your current story looks like, Rich.
I'm going to take a second to try to dry the tears from what you said about me. That matters so deeply to me, more than even the topic we're going to delve into. So thank you for seeing me as I am and what happens behind our front door. Thank you.
It's beautiful,
okay.
Bro.
What I do with my days. I want to start with just a caveat that it might sound amazing. It might sound uber sexy. And
yeah, let's get the sexy out of the way.
Probably 5% of the time.
Yeah.
Because most of my days are spent in what would be considered a corporate environment, even though it goes by another name. So I've been in the Air Force. I'm coming up on 25 years. I'm an officer. I've been a pilot now for 22 of those 25 years. And I live here in Colorado Springs. My dailies involve me working in sort of a very corporate structure where there's a boss, where there's rank and file, chain of command. And most of the jobs that I do are primarily administrative or organizational or logistics. And the cool part of my job is, I fly C-130s. And right now, my current job is to run our aerial firefighting program. We take a huge Hulken airplane, stick a massive tank in the back, and we go fight wildfire all over the United States, and in some cases all over the world. I get to teach other folks how to do that. I get to learn in an environment of some incredibly unsung heroes that do yeoman's work throughout mostly the summer, and get to do something about the threat of houses burning down and people's livelihoods going up in flames. That's the sexy part. The unsexy part is the silent majority of my days where I'm reviewing copy, or I'm helping revise policy, or I'm just sitting in board meetings, learning about new processes and how to take care of people and all that stuff. So I've been doing that, and I've been I've been coming up in the same location, in the same context, for now coming up on 25 years. Um, I don't give anyone career advice, because God had his hand on me from a very early age and gave me a military career where I rarely, if ever, moved. So that's my dailies. That's what I do. And as one could imagine, in sort of a military context, just like in any other corporate environment, the hand is always on the small of our backs, pushing us into the next level, into the next layer, into the higher rank, into the next level of leadership, where I find myself wondering about the Peter principle and how I probably maxed that out 2 rungs ago. And
The Peter principle being what?
The Peter principle being, what is that? You're promoted. Every man is promoted to a level of one level of competency above what he's capable of handling. So always being just a little bit more of a poser, a little bit more of a young, question driven, I don't know what I'm doing here, why are they trusting me kind of environment.
Okay. Why do they call that the Peter principle?
I'm sure there's a reason. It was probably written by some dude named, I don't know, Peter, but not the same one that we know from the Bible.
Okay. All right. I was just wondering if I had missed something in the Gospels there. Okay. All right. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Family.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Robin and I are about to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. She's a Colorado native. I am a native of San Antonio, Texas, which is one of the reasons that my heart burns for being sons and where you're at in the place that you find yourself, where you've put down roots. And we have 3 children. Now Aubrey is 17. She is finishing her junior year in high school right now. Lauren is 14. She's finishing 8th grade right now. And then my warrior son, Hunter, is 10, and he's finishing up 4th grade right now. Robin is a 1st grade teacher in the school system that all 3 of my kids go to. So we got a neat vibe where education and school and what happens around the school is pretty much, it takes center stage most days, whether we're all together or not. So 3 very, very active kids, all engaged in different things. And so, my evenings these days are spent, like most dads, making sure that people get where they need to go and that I can enjoy what they're up to as much as I can.
And one of the talents that I did not know that you had until your oldest, Aubrey, allowed that to surface is that you are a piano player. Are you not?
Guilty. But the only time that really comes out, so Aubrey is way better than me. She's been taking lessons now for 9 years, and she does it primarily for creative outlet and joy. But the only time I sit down and tickle the keys is when she invites me in to play duets at her recitals, and that's a super fun, neat way to connect with her.
Well, what's so fun is I was telling my kids last night, both of my kids, by the way, are home from college. I've got a 21-year-old son, Bear, and I've got a 20-year-old now daughter named Bosley. And they both came home last night. So there was tons of joy in our home. And, we're bouncing around and getting used to one another again. And I told them that you and I were going to be talking. Rich is affectionately named Uncle Pants around our home. And I said, I'm going to be having a conversation with Uncle Pants tomorrow morning. And we were talking and I said, and I've got a video I want to show you guys. And they were very excited, but it was too late and I needed to go to bed. So anyway, today we're going to be watching you with your recital with Aubrey today. And I'm sure we're all going to be giggling. It's awesome. It brought me near to tears to watch that intimacy and just the friendship that the two of you put on display, sitting beside one another on a piano bench, no words between you. And there was something powerful about you being the second class in it. And guys, like Rich will play his part, on the right end of the piano, and then when it comes time to turn the page, he'll stop, he'll stand up, and he'll reach up and he'll turn the page so his daughter can continue leading, and then he jumps in behind her again. There's just something really holy about that, and representative of the way a good father lets the teenagers begin to lead at the appropriate time. So anyway, it's beautiful. So thank you for sharing that with me. Okay, so we are going to dive into it, but real briefly, what does sonship look like to you right now?
Thanks for asking, and I'm just going to risk being authentic with you. This is a very difficult hour to live in. These are difficult days to live in. And since we are going to talk about work, I'm coming off of a string of intense few months. I don't say this with any shame, but I've been working long hours, long days, and I just came off a string of 21 days with no days off. Most of those days were on the road, and that's been my normal for a few months now. We know this part of the year for me at work gets pretty intense. So I'm traveling a lot. I have high stress demands placed on me uniquely, where I don't have a whole lot of help, and that's fine. With the erosive effect of my union with God and time to just get away and Sabbath and breathe and connect with Him is very scarce. Mm-hmm. And I have to make pretty strong lifts and pretty, it takes a lot of courage for me to push back and, take time for me. Where I'm learning, through pain and process and grief, is that I have a reluctance to set time aside for my heart and my connection with God, and instead do all the things that we just talked about. Come through for work, come through for family, be it all the things, at the expense of time with God. And so my sonship has actually gone through a pretty significant trial. Mm-hmm. And it's only because of the encouragement of so many people in my life that I've taken the offer to push back on the world and say, no, I matter too. My heart and my union with God matters. And so I'm regaining the trail right now. I'm regaining orientation to God's heart. And the cool thing, Jay, about that is, we've done plenty of miles in pursuing our sonship and seeking out the Father, to understand that actually He's been the one chasing after me the whole time. And He's covered me in thousands of ways that I didn't know that He was covering me until got on the other side and looked back and saw His provision, and saw His protection, and saw His affirmation in the dailies and the hourlies and the little things. So I'm in that place of reflection and sorting out, how did I get myself here? How did I get myself into these situations? And a lot of soul searching, and a lot of time with God to ask, okay, is this right? Is this where you have me? And is this all on time? And 100% of the answers from Him are absolutely yes. This is all on time. This is all necessary. This is all from His heart for me.
Well, way to process that, way to be present to where you are. And as a son, to be open to asking God the hard questions and not shying away from them and not trying to feel like you got to figure it out by yourself. So I relate very much to that. Yeah. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. So sonship is a category. Sonship, to be a son, is an identity. Mm-hmm. It is the piece of our identity that all other pieces of our identity are intended to submit to. Mm-hmm. It is the piece of our identity that holds the light up to see us through dark places and to navigate us into God's best, because sons have a relationship with the master of the house that employees or slaves or servants don't. And so what to be able to see ourselves as sons and to ask the question that a son who knows that he's loved or is learning that he's loved would ask in the context of work is a very, very important thing. How do we begin changing the questions that we're asking? How do we begin boldly coming because of this new identity? How do we come boldly in a way that we never would have before? So here's a question for you. Would you say, Rich, that you have a kingdom heart?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's just explore that. What does a kingdom heart look like? What does it feel like? And when did you begin to know, if you could go back in your story and say, I can recognize where I began to feel a kingdom heart. Let's just explore that idea.
Again, it's so interesting to process your own story and do that thing. Look back, look at the places that you've been and where you go and where you've come from. I know now at 47 years old that God has the Ephesians promise is absolutely true, that long before he laid down the foundations of this earth, he had me in mind and he set me apart. And even thinking through sort of grade school, I came up, I'm a 13-year Catholic school student from K through 12 there in San Antonio. And I can see his handprints on me through so many different stories in my comeuppance. I knew that there was something about God that was absolutely captivating from a very early age. And he sent me off to college, and it was there in college that, you know, a courageous man, a senior, came to me when I was a freshman and said, "You're not going to make it through without an upgrade in your faith." And he was right. And he led me into a deeper understanding and union with Jesus. Then I graduated. I was released into the world, into basically my job was everything to me, because military service, they tell me where I'm going to live. They're going to tell me what I'm going to do. They're going to provide my provision and my protection and my housing and all that. So I was a young solo 20-something-year-old man getting, you know, kind of moved through the system, as it were. And those were years of some darkness and some searching and some questions that or some actions and some choices that I'm not really all that proud of. And then God got a hold of me again. He was pursuing me the whole time. And, you know, my story with faith starts with really in depth. The depth of my faith actually came when I met Robin. I met her randomly in a church. It was a total God thing. In a church here in Colorado Springs. And we had that awkward first Christmas where we're dating, and we've been dating for about 6 or 7 months, and we have to give each other gifts. And, you know, we want to come across as thoughtful and, you know, like we love God. We don't know what to do about that. We're both young in our faith. So I got her a monogram New Living Translation Bible with her name on it. Her maiden name, because I didn't want to make any assumptions, right? And
okay.
She talked to one of her friends from the church she was attending. She lived about 2 hours away. And she was talking to one of her guy friends, and he said, "Hey, there's this new book that just hit the presses, and it's great for men, and you should get it for him." And that book happened to be Wild at Heart. And yeah, that started me on a faith journey. It opened my eyes at about 23 years old to the true kingdom, and I was hooked. I was all in. Um, yeah, so that was the real core basis foundation of introduction into this message, into the
Mm-hmm.
larger story, into my heart and the place that I belonged. I finally felt this something that mattered way more than anything else in my life, even Robin, even the pursuit of marriage and money and power and all that. So um, was introduced and became a disciple of John Eldridge's message, and I let him and submitted to his leadership for up till the present day. The story where it gets in depth, and where my job and my career intersect the kingdom, it as all things gets more complicated, and it got deeper and deeper. And at some point I had made an agreement that I had reached the top of my capability and my capacity doing Air Force stuff and doing pilot stuff. I had reached the top of that, and so I just kind of settled for, okay, I'm going to be a middle manager for the rest of my life, and in the career path that I'm in, that's totally okay. Well, God got a hold of me about 10 and a half years ago, and he said, no, that's not you anymore. I've initiated you. I've apprenticed you in so much more than what you're currently doing. And you have what it takes. And I love you. My hand's on you. Will you trust me? And I consented. Well, what he did with that consent, and that's something that I'm very passionate about, Jay, is just the power of saying yes to God has so much more to do with our kingdom heart than anything else we can possibly chase after. And I have story after story after story of what happens when men consent.
Okay. Okay. So let's go back in your story, because this is every man's got this, I think, in their story. Can
Mm-hmm.
you take us back to the worst place where you were at your worst? I would just say the pit of despair,
Mm-hmm.
because I know God came and met you somehow in that. But without going into how God came and met you, can you just take us back in your story to where it was the worst and give us some insight into what was going on?
Actually, the pit of despair, the worst moment for me was after I consented to God, after I consented to his initiation and his guidance. Because it wasn't shortly thereafter that God broke all the rules. And one of the most pivotal moments in my life was when I went up to the mountains here in Colorado. I got invited into Morgan Snyder's Become Good Soil intensive retreat. That was the most powerful encounter I ever had with a father, with the Father through other wise men. The story gets messy because 10 days after I left that retreat, my boss, we tragically lost him. He passed away under tragic circumstances. And in that moment, I had all of the initiation and all of the clarity, and so many good men that had just heard my story to be able to speak into my life and tell me that actually, and introduce me to the fact that God was calling me in to take that man's place, take a promotion, take his job in the tragedy, in the aftermath of what happened, because he was well loved, he was well liked, and he actually had a lot to do with my maturation and leadership. And so I'll use corporate terms. I became sort of a department head of a big corporation. Even though we're talking about a military thing, I became a department head. I took his job, and there began this wild adventure of leadership and learning and trying on things, taking on too much, learning to say no, all of that. So a promotion in my category was actually God moving me into the lowest seat at the table in the kingdom economy, my moving up was actually me moving down into a place of service, into a place of serving the people around me.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
The promotion for me was into a level of leadership where there was expectation on me with very little maneuver space, if you will, very little latitude to lead well. So what I wanted was submitted to the leadership of the higher ups. And I had very little to say about, well, I think we should go in a different direction. I think we should take this off our plate. And the answer was no, you're going to do more with less, which is a common, we're very familiar with that these days. In all walks of life. We're going to do more with less. You need to lead, but we're going to tell you how to do it. We're going to give you all, more expectations than you can handle. And so that began this pit of despair thing, because I was directly in contact with the people that I was responsible for. And these, my heart immediately turned in that promotion to the fact that these were human beings. These were sons and daughters of God that I had the responsibility of shepherding and loving, and also demanding their productivity. The expectation of the machine or the company or the corporation was that they were actually tools to a bottom line, and not human beings with hearts and needs and families and other things going on in their lives. So it was a submission to them to navigate, okay, God, how do I lead them in this corporate structure, love them well, but also do my duty, do my share of the task to ensure that what we're all about here, our mission, is getting done.
So did you see that assignment as clearly then as you do now?
No.
What did you see, and why was it? I mean, I would assume, knowing you now, that you cherish the opportunity to have people under your care and to take care of them and to lead them well. But it's an insanely intimidating thing when we're younger. What did you know at the time, and what could you appreciate at the time as opposed to now?
I came at it with an enthusiasm and a vigor, a youthful enthusiasm, like, I'm going to change this place. I have a vision, and I have gifting, and I know what we need right now. The frustration came from the fact that, first of all, there was no one to sort of like hand everything off to me. He had left this earth. And so I went looking for guidance and counsel from my higher ups, and they, for whatever reason, chose not to give it to me, or they didn't know how to handle the job themselves. So I was unmentored, I was unshepherded, and I felt very unfathered. When I asked for help, what I got in turn was more demand. That was part of the pain, and caused a lot of anger and resentment in me in those days, in my youthful vigor of like, hey, I want to be able to have some freedom to do what I think I need to be doing right now. And to, keep in mind, we're still in the aftermath of a tragedy, and love the people that are around us, and, the people that love this man like me, to recover and take some time and do the right things and love our folks well, so that they can emerge from this tragedy with some rootedness and centeredness, and understand that they are loved and that they are valued. So my frustration in those moments were the fact that what I was looking for was fathering, and I wasn't getting it in my corporate place.
And of course, how can anybody know that's what you needed? That's a word that's so closely tied with, John Eldridge's presentation of the gospel. Well, not even John Eldredge in particular, but that's just such a gospel-centric point of view that you're just banging your head up against a wall if you're looking for that from anybody. And did you even have that category at the time to know that that's what you were looking for?
So that's I think where my heart goes in this conversation, just to name it, Jay, is we find our kingdom heart. We find ourselves in the larger story. We find ourselves as sons that matter, that have strength, and we have affirmation from our Father. We have love that conquers everything else. And then God does this seemingly unbelievably sinister thing, and he puts us in an environment like what I'm describing. He puts us at work. And when we're young in this message and we're looking and we're pining for all of the provision and union with God that we can possibly get our hands on, and have a conscious understanding that God is with me and God is providing for me and he's protecting me and all of that. He puts us in that place, that context. What I demanded was that my boss was actually my Father and my Jesus and my Holy Spirit. And when that wasn't readily apparently available through my bosses, my coworkers, people that I worked around, that I wasn't being handled well, my heart wasn't being honored, and that kind of thing, what you described earlier, it becomes vividly clear. What I need to do is get out of this place. I need to bail, because this is not, I'm a fish out of water now.
Let's go into that tension. Like, go back to that and describe what's going on inside your heart, what's going on inside your mind. What is the enemy, the world, and even just your broken self? Like, what are the voices saying to you at this time in the middle of this tension with your workload, and also with a budding understanding of the kingdom, and with a slowly evolving understanding of your identity as a son, because you're immature in all of these things at the time? Describe the tension.
The enemy put in front of me what I've come to understand as a crossroads that wasn't actually there. It was a mirage. It was a duality. It was a either or choice that wasn't actually there. The choices were turn left and actually give your heart to God fully. And in order to do that, you need to remove yourself from all secular things, to include this job, this location, this place where you're planted. Get out, bail, go hard left, and pull up all the roots that you've put down here. Or take a full compromise and understand that you can stay here, but you will live forever with a divided heart. You'll never live into your true identity fully, and put to death the old man, because the old man is necessary to survive in this environment, to get the accolades, or to get the stability, or to get the provision. It's an either or choice. That's it.
Okay, let's just pause there for a minute, because I feel like every son needs to ask the question whether they have or whether they are wrestling with that. So you came to what appeared to be, you called it a mirage. Mm-hmm. It is a real crossroads. There's no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. But it is the classic tension of believing that, wrestling with either living a life that's sacred or secular, and believing that, and not yet recognizing that there could be a third option, or that there could be some sort of a a convergence or a hybrid of the two. It's in your excitement and your enthusiasm about what God is doing in your heart, you want to chase after that wholeheartedly. And so that feels like life. And in contrast, you are in a place where none of that is affirmed. You're not, when you come home, you can listen to podcasts, you can read your Bible, you can talk to your wife, and all of that feels life-giving. You go to work, and there feels like there's absolutely no nourishment at all. So this feels like death. Life versus death, sacred versus secular. It makes all the sense in the world that we would become deeply unhappy and have a ton of questions that begin to present themselves at that time. Okay, so sons, if you're out there, I know that you have wrestled with this. Rich, just simply, is God in that, in your experience?
He is, for me, the interpretation that he brought to me just in time was that anytime that we're faced with that duality, hard left, hard right, that is the attitude, and those are the options presented to slaves. Slavery provides the slave two options: submit or resist. Those are your two options. That in and of itself is indicative of the kingdom of darkness. That only our enemy would set up a duality where there's a hard left or a hard right. The kingdom of God is limitless. And so the kingdom, sonship, one of the deeply rooted facets of sonship is that there's always more options. There's always another perspective. There's always more wisdom. There's always more avenues to take. And God must be invited into that duality to show us the other paths, the narrower path, the one that we can't necessarily see in what self-help or self-promotion or career advice. One of the things that bothers me about corporate America is what's been substituted under the word mentorship is that there's always more options, and God loves to be asked, show me the narrow path here.
Okay, so you're in a position in your story where responsibility has been thrust upon you. Immediately after, a new identity is being presented to you to receive and to begin to walk in. That's a huge, what a confluence right there. What huge waves that you're now navigating in your little raft with very, very limited experience in walking with sonship, and in this new category, only excitement, only the vigor of a young child who's going on a big adventure and is desperately needing somebody to keep them safe as they go on it, because you don't have the experience and you don't have many mentors around you to comfort you and tell you everything's going to be okay, or here's how you walk through it. So, what comes up in your heart? What are the questions that you feel are probably common that come up in the heart of a son who's working in what he feels like a secular and lifeless environment? How does that present here in here?
Yeah. The first question is an easy one. God, am I supposed to stay here? Is this my post? Is this where you would have me to continue my service, right? Whatever that looks like, whatever your job is, however you want to define it, whatever you want to call it. Is this where you want me? When I asked him that question, he said, you are staying. I'm actually, his words were, I'm going to make it impossible for you to leave, which was actually kind, because it removed that option. Then the question of where is the narrow path? What are you up to? The questions that come up under that category are pretty limitless. Do you want me to, and recent history is sort of defined it, right? Like there was what was the latest thing about quiet quitting, silent quitting, where, yeah, I'm going to show up, but I'm not really going to show up. I'll be there, but I'm not going to be there. You're not getting 100% of me. Or 70%, right? Give less to your work than you give to your family and to your faith and the things that matter most. How do I do that, right? Is that what you have for me, God? And God's like, no, you live wholeheartely here. How do I do that? I'll just be quite frank, Jay, because I know that you can handle it and you love me and you're for me. What I held up as a young son, new to this idea of sonship, is, well, what I know is Jay Heck is out there living his best life. Or Pastor so-and-so is out there living his best life. I mean, look at the way that he's uniquely connected with God, and he's got time to read whatever his heart desires and take it in and drink and get away, right? And all of these adventures that are out there, the temptation for me is to notice and to keep score of how I'm missing out on all of that, because my contract says I'll be here from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon with a half-hour lunch break, and that's all you get. And if you need to take time off, your PTO comes when your boss tells you, and it's not under the will of God and all those things. That's the real trap that I had to contend with, is these men that I hold up that are living this life of sonship, that are further down the path, are mostly, if not all, in some sort of pastor minister role. So they're holding up this example of sonship and life with God that probably is only available in their quote unquote line of work.
What does that tempt you to do when you see this picture and it causes this reaction in you?
Mm-hmm.
What's the result? I mean, just natural back then when you wrestled with that, were you angry? Who were you angry with? Mm-hmm. What were the questions? Who were, silently or verbally, who were you yelling at in your head?
I mean, obviously I did a lot of yelling at God, because he made it clear he's going to make it impossible for me to leave the post that I'm at, while men that I admire, that I look up to, that are setting and showing me the path, are unwittingly, now this is my youthful misunderstanding and ignorance, what you're laying before me is that the life with God is only available when you're having these spectacular encounters in nature, in adventure, that, a 10-day getaway is just a normal part of the job, right? And the other people that I honestly yelled at were my wife and my kids, because my energy and my time was being, in those days, it was my energy and time is being stolen from me, because I have to come through and I have little kids and they have to get places, or they need a diaper change, or they're going to wake me up in the middle of the night when I have a big whatever the next day. Like, I was angry at a lot of different people in a lot of different categories, including Jesus.
Angry at Jesus for what you feel he had given you in comparison to somebody else?
Yeah, like where I felt like I was being invited into a rich banquet where I could smell all the amazing prepared food, but I wasn't allowed to sit at the table and dine.
It sounds a bit, well, it's reminding me in this moment of Jesus with Peter and with John, and he's indicating to John that his fate is different than the one for Peter. And Peter's a bit offended by that because Jesus is inviting him into something that's unique to him. Why can't my story be like his story? And Jesus says, what's it to you? That's his story. This is your story. And your only job is to carry through with what I've called you to. And that is a very tough, that's a tough pill to swallow, especially in the moment, without hindsight or without foresight.
Yep.
Because we can't imagine that we can come to peace with God's assignment for us at the moment. That because we're not there. We're not in the place of peace yet. Okay. You have more to say about that?
Yeah, that in fact, one of my mentors, I was fortunate enough, blessed enough to have a mentor in my life that was leading me down the path. And he himself was, he was not in quote unquote ministry. And he actually led me through contending with that unique question of Jesus looking me in the eyes and asking me why I cared so much about what other people were getting. And like, and certainly this is a common experience for a lot of men, that we look around at our workplaces and see other people slacking or getting by or cheating or cutting corners, whatever the case, some version of finding a shortcut, getting away with it, and actually getting accolades for it, and getting, the whatever benefit they got from that, when, a wholehearted man shows up at his work and wants to do what's right and do the what brings integrity to the job that's been assigned to us. And I had to contend with that and actually learn that part of sonship is to release other people in my workplace to whatever God's up to in their life. That is counterintuitive, Jay, to one of the things that I've stumbled upon that's so powerful about what God has to say about our work. Because one of the things that I believe now is that we have, as working men, if I can use that term, sons at work, what we've done is outsourced a lot of our desire for guidance and a lot of our desire for finding God in our work to folks that should never be asked the question. And by those people, I mean like the men that we submit to in our churches, our pastors, and even in some stances our ministers, because Jay, you have a unique role as a leader in my life. I submit to you, but I also confess that what I want you to be is Jesus. And as our friendship has grown and deepened, I've come to understand that you're a beautiful man with unique gifting, and I no longer want to saddle you with the role of savior in my life. So when we take our questions about work to folks like our pastors, they are going to try to offer from a place that they shouldn't be asked to offer from. We take our questions to God and give him permission to answer our questions however he wants. So in that category, one of the things that we've been misled about in our work is that most of the stuff that's out there right now about our role in work in the kingdom will tell you that we're there to love others. God put kingdom-hearted men in our corporate environments and our jobs, wherever they are, to be the presence of Jesus where they are and to love others. And the fallacy with that is if the boss is expecting you to grow their kingdom and you're there to love others, nothing's ever going to get done. Right? If your whole objective is to love others, we're missing out on the role and the post that God put us there to do. If you are a master carpenter and you can build phenomenal structures and you can build phenomenal cabinets and bless people, and you're really good at that, and you set all that aside just to love the people that you're around, actually you're you're wasting the opportunity to bless others and and bless the world through the gifting that God's given you. So loving others gets entangled with this idea in my story about how do I confront the guy that's slacking, because he shouldn't be allowed to get away with it. I should be loving my boss. I should be loving that guy and calling him up to something that I believe he's more capable of doing more, even though he's either a peer or someone that's not appointed under my care. So the loving thing to do is to make sure that he picks up his game. Right?
Mm-hmm.
At least in my orphan self, I need to invite him up into, hey, you can do more. I know what you're up to behind closed doors. I know that you're cutting corners. But in reality, it's the position of orphan that says, why does he get away with stuff? Why am I not allowed to slack, right?
Let me just read the scripture here and then let you respond to this, okay? Because there's a scripture that all of us are, familiar with. It is, okay, Colossians 3:23-24. Work willingly at whatever you do, or other translation, with all your heart at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people, remembering that the Lord will give you an inheritance as your reward, and that the master that you are serving is Christ.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that names a lot in that short verse. And we do hear it a lot about working as unto the Lord. The journey of sonship that invites me into, that I'm still sorting out, is that feeling of me and my heart to find father and to find mother. How do I navigate that need? And it's a need in the place that I'm working, under the people, the broken people, that may or may not have a category for God at all. How do I do that? And what I've been invited into, that God's made clear to me, is, am I looking to my work to be my God? There's a thing inside of us that we've been led into, at least I'm familiar with, I'm sure a lot of other men are familiar with it, that like the whole purpose of your job is to provide for your family. And, in a lot of cases, 2 generations away from the Great Depression, that was certainly what I was brought up under. Work hard, work harder than the guy next to you, for the sake of being able to provide some security and stability for you and your family. And then be generous, right? And what that verse in Colossians sort of turns upside down is, am I actually looking to my job, to my company, to my bosses, to provide the provision that God actually wants to pour out? And in order to do that, steps on the journey include dissociating my identity with my job. It's a necessary step to say that I don't call myself, I am a pilot. I do fly airplanes, but I am not a pilot. To assign I am is a very deep core association with my identity. And if I am a carpenter, well, you've placed limits on who you are and what God can do for you and what you can bring into the world. Just like I am a pastor will do the same thing. If you meet somebody, at a hardware store, and you pick up a conversation because you're both interested in, which is the most powerful weed eater on the market, and he says, I'm a pastor. The conversation shifts, doesn't it? And that's why the chimney sweep is so necessary, because what I've come to understand is, I get paid through my job because that's how God wants to funnel his provision. If he wants to funnel it a different way, I now give him permission to do that.
Yeah. One of the ways that I have learned over the years to engage that question, to not give it any greater weight than it deserves, is to simply ask the question, so how do you spend your day that helps you put food on the table?
Yes.
And it kind of hopefully, disentangles some of the identity that we tend to get from, from how we spend our days, where we go to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. C.S. Lewis talks about it too. In The Weight of Glory, what we are led to believe about our jobs is that there always has to be a plan. There always has to be a structure, that we have to take charge of, your 3-year plan, your 5-year plan, your 10-year plan. When you get assigned a project, you get a timeline, right? You get an expectation, you get due outs, you get all of the things that involve looking into the future and structuring your life into the I have to take control over my future. And God has invited me into, okay, yep, that might be necessary for your boss or your leadership to understand that they have an outcome that they're seeking. But as a son, when I show up, he wants me to live daily. Ask for the daily bread. C.S. Lewis says, never commit your virtue or your happiness to the future. Happy work is best done by the man who takes his long-term plans somewhat lightly and works from moment to moment as to the Lord. It's only in our daily bread that we're encouraged to ask for.
Knowing that God is up to something, that's one of the questions that you said presented itself. Mm-hmm. And it does. When you're unhappy at your work, questions pop up in your head. Sentences, accusations, strategies to make the situation better. Hopefully. What dark and ugly things does God use discontent in the work environment to bring to the surface?
Wow. This is fresh. This is a fresh story from 2 days ago. The right ordering of the loves is a term that John Eldredge has kind of invited us into. There is a right ordering of things that you love, right? And I think the Desert Fathers actually encouraged an examination of how much do you love certain things. And, there's actually a hierarchy of love that the kingdom is designed around. Love God is the greatest commandment, right along with loving his people. That's the greatest commandment. It was a couple of days ago that I was really in a dark place because of the recent life that I've been living, where I've been gone a lot, been exhausted in work. And what I became aware of painfully in a pretty dark place this week was that my family continued to live their lives while I was gone, while I was engaged in other things, came home exhausted. And what I felt was this pull of the fact that I feel like there's a debt that I have to pay back to my family now, because I've given more than what I would consider in my own internal monologue to be my fair share to my work, because the work required it of me. My job needed me to do these things. Now I was behind because I missed Lauren's championship track meet. I missed several of my son's football games. I missed my daughter's concert. I missed out on so much that now I was behind. And so that thing of like me taking care of and finding soul care and finding space for me to reconnect and breathe and confess and all that time with God, I just put that on the back burner, right? So it was a dark place because I just felt so much pressure where we were talking about the slave mentality is, left or right. I felt like there wasn't even an option. The requirements levied on me as a man with all of these responsibilities said that I don't even have an option. And it took Robin and courage to name in me that no one actually is keeping score. No one is keeping track of that debt that I missed, because she loves me enough to say that she knows that I'm with them when they're doing their things, just like I know that they're with me when I'm doing work. And what that teased out in me is like, yeah, true. No one's keeping score except me. Because what I want is to be the dad that always comes through. I want to be the dad that is able to. And I have this resentment towards my work because I can point at my work and blame them for the fact that I have to be away from the things that I value more. So what God has done with that through the wise counsel of my wife, who has to deal with my pain, unfortunately, more than I would ever want to levy on her.
She's good at it.
She invited me first to have the courage to say, I'm not going to blame my work for that anymore. I'm going to forgive my work because they don't bear the responsibility. It's actually the context that God has placed me. And I'm no longer going to keep score. I surrender the scorecard of the debts that I feel like my family is bearing, because we're all living our lives in union with God first, without me being in the way. And in doing so, I give myself permission to not come through at every possible moment. If the life of Jesus included the life of disappointing people that he loved, and by that I mean withdrawing, going the opposite direction, not giving into the crowd and the momentum behind what he was building. And there's story after story after story of Jesus being disappointing to those that loved him the most. Then I stand to gain from learning that discipline as well. No one else in my world would say that I'm disappointing them by choosing union with God, by choosing time with him, by choosing a way, because I'm not going to miss everything that my kids are up to. That's not in me. So no one would ever say that I'm disappointing. I have to use that language myself. And the reality, Jay, that I'm naming is, had I bailed on my job, God would not have had access to surface that in me.
So how important is it for you to get a helpful answer from God, or how important is it to your soul that God father you through the pain of that question?
Oh, it's vital. And that harkens to an idea that I have, that I believe, that I've come to believe, that I feel like God has just opened my eyes to. And that's the idea of how he initiates us at work. The power of his initiation at work. We talk about rites of initiation, and a while back, John and his son Sam Eldridge wrote a book called Killing Lions, and it's about these rites of passage where the teenage boys leave home, they're pulled out of their family environment and sent out into the wild with men, and as part of their initiation, what they have to do is kill a lion. Right? It's a very tribal thing that men are initiated in the wild. And so with that as a structure, of what initiation looks like. I believe that men at work, at their jobs, at their posts, whatever that looks like, is the most important and powerful tool that God uses to initiate his sons. Time away with him, retreats, family, friendships, all of those other categories are necessary. But the most powerful works of initiation that God does is with his sons at work. Here's why. I don't get a choice in most of the things that I engage in at my work. I do what I'm told. I do what my contract says I'll do, and I'll do it with the people that are assigned around me. I don't get to pick. I don't get to pick race, creed, color, sex, national origin, handicap, condition, or age of the people I work with. I don't get to ask, hey, do you believe in Jesus? Because if you do, then we can get to work. None of that is available. God puts us out in the wild, even if it doesn't look like wilderness. He puts us in the wilderness of our souls for him to reveal and for him to initiate and for him to preach the gospel in ways that on the surface seem completely impossible. The ways that he has initiated me are countless because he made it impossible for me to leave the job that I'm at. And he said, these are the people, this is the task. And thank God he gave me the words of Dallas Willard that said, if you want to bring God into your workplace, if that's your heart, which I think we all believe and we all agree with in this community, if you want to bring God into the workplace, the first thing you must understand is that he's already there. We live in a God-breathed, God-bathed world. His protection is all around us. His provision is all around us. Even in this world at war, he has us set apart, and he will initiate his sons. And he uses these wacky, wild people that you would never believe to help co-opt his task. So the questions now shift from, God, why do you have me here? Why are you being so cruel? To God, how are you initiating me in this, whatever the tension is, whatever the struggle is, whatever the questions are that are rising, the question, the heart of a son shifts to God, how are you initiating me?
Okay, now that is a major transition of maturity to go from here to here. And I believe that many men, sadly, never make it. Let's end part one of this two-part discussion with Rich Pantusa right here, kind of in that tension. And as we come back for episode 2, we are going to dive into how God sets a blueprint for sonship and the work and the wilderness that he calls us all into in order to initiate us, using the nation of Israel and also using Jesus to illustrate those blueprints. So glad you joined Rich and I for this first portion of this conversation. It gets rich, it gets deeper, and we pray that you come and join us again for part 2. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next time.